Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with an ultra Vires, Charles Coulombe.
Ultra Vires.
Yeah, big time.
Exceeding my authority.
Always.
Going beyond my grasp.
Absolutely.
Imposing without a shred of legitimacy my power over others.
Yes.
Well, somebody's got to do it. If not the Pope or the President, why not me?
That's
Got
true.
you there, smart guy.
Yeah.
But ultra vires is a good word these days. I mean, particularly right now, we're having a lot of excitement in Europe with the whole vaccination thing. Reason being that on the one hand, the Président de la République of France, Monsieur Macron, he has declared that they will destroy the lives, make miserable the lives of the non-vaccinated. They shall emmerder, which is to, how can I put this nice? I mean, it's quite vulgar. He basically said we'll excrementalize them.
What happened to liberty, fraternity, and equality?
You're one of those people who take revolutionaries at face value.
Oh.
I mean, that's like saying what happened to the money back guarantee. You know, come on. When a con man sells you, you're sold. That's the way it works. That's the beauty of revolutions. So anyway, Macron spoke out of his rear end on that this week, and it's gotten a great deal of excitement. Again, using a verb rather like emmerder is just to see that come out of a mouth of a supposed head of state. These people are just utter jerks, this generation of morons. Fortunately, our own Chancellor Nehammer in Austria, he one-upped him. Now, here, as you know, they're debating putting the unvaxxed, giving them heavy fines starting in February, if not imprisoning them. Now, His Excellency, the Chancellor, has had not one, not two, but 3 vaccinations. He was at a meeting with masks on everybody, and everyone's separated by plastic partitions. You know what happened?
They all got COVID? What? I don't know.
No, they didn't all get COVID, but he did. So what was the good of getting vaccinated again? I seem to have forgotten something. But this is what they're going to punish people for not doing in February. What I think is that Macron should visit Nehammer. Misery loves company. Happiness is contagious. Maybe the two of them should get married. I don't know. What I do know is that, you add to the mix the idiot in Spain, the idiot in Italy, and of course our own morons at home. The rulership of the planet has gone stupid. It's just and vulgar and idiotic. You know, in the immortal words of a streetwalker I knew many years ago, if them's the best, I pities the rest.
Was she talking politics? What was she talking about?
Yeah, we were talking politics. Well, I suppose I should explain how I got to meet this lady.
Okay.
We were back when I was in high school. If I wanted to go into Hollywood, I had to get on the bus on San Fernando Road that goes all the way down through the valley and eventually through Burbank and would end up in Hollywood. Well, if I went down on a Friday night to go to my scout meeting at Blessed Sacrament, so now I'm like, 16, 17, etc. 15, 16, 17. very often ladies who were going to their jobs, so to speak, on Sunset Boulevard would get on that same bus. So every Friday night, I would see the same ladies on the way down. And yes, I knew what they were, but they had no interest in me, especially in my scout uniform, except to chat. And this particular lady, I would see her every Friday night, and for, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 months, I saw her once a week, and we just talk and talk and talk. And I knew what she was going to be doing. She kind of referred to it obliquely, and I could tell by the way she was dressed. So it was, I don't know, the hooker and the Boy Scout would be an interesting name for something. But at any rate, she had a lot of interesting views about a lot of things, I can tell you. And at one point, we were discussing politics, and this was the Carter years, remember. And one of the things that they would yap about with Carter was that he was a genius. He was brilliant. And so
I thought he was a peanut farmer.
Well, yes, but he was more than that. Let me see. Hold on a second. Jimmy Carter, genius. Sure that there'll be some remnant of that particular line of attack. He was 39th president of the United States. He was a top scholar. He was a nuclear physicist. Yeah, exactly right. See, I know what I'm talking about. The Carter Center. This is, if you go to the Carter Center, it'll tell you all about it. He took graduate work at Union College in Schenectady, New York, in reactor technology and nuclear physics, and served as senior officer of the pre-commissioning crew of the Seawolf, the second nuclear submarine. And his supposed brains was something that they were constantly yapping about in the both during and after the election. So one night, this lady and myself were on the bus headed down to Hollywood. And these are the old RTD buses. These were the ones with the big front windows and the small ones. And it was very cheesy because, the bus to Somar, it's not like they really cared. Anyhow, so we're talking, and, I jocularly said to her, well, when she was complaining about how the president was getting rid of the 3 martini lunch, because apparently a lot of her clients were upset by that, and as a result were becoming less forthcoming, as you might say, less generous, I guess is the word. I said, well, Thelma, gotta tell you, the president's a nuclear physicist. So they say that he and his team are the brightest and the best we've ever had. And so she responded with, "If them's the best, I pit is the rest." So that was a little bit of down home reality for the young boy, for the idealist. The Thelma was she was very down to earth, very very earthy. Yeah.
Okay. So, okay, I don't know where to go to here from here after the hooker story.
What? Did I say she was a hooker?
He said the hooker and the Boy Scout would be the name of.
Well, no, I said that'd be a title. I didn't say she was a hooker. I said that'd be a good title. I don't mean it would refer necessarily to her.
Okay.
No, poor lady. I felt very badly for her. Because it's dangerous work, I can tell you.
Yeah.
But no, it's certainly her observations and those of her coworkers were very interesting, I can tell you. And believe it or not, they rarely talked about their work. It was usually about a lot of other stuff, politics and religion, who was getting Jesus, that kind of thing. It was very eye-opening in some ways. And again, not just the obvious. You know, the one of the last times I saw her, though, she said, "Honey, I'd offer you a date, but I guess you too much of a Boy Scout for that." And we both laughed hysterically. I said, "Yeah, you're right." Well, it was Hollywood in the 70s. Mistakes were made.
That's for sure.
Yeah, well.
So, where are we now in the calendar?
Well, where are we now is that Thelma has more sense than anybody in power now. That's where we are now. I think she could have shown Kamala Harris a thing or two. Oh, speaking of which, a friend of mine saw her former squeeze, Willie Brown, in San Francisco this past week, having lunch, believe it or not, with other party bigwigs and complaining about the state of the Democratic Party.
I thought he's like 90.
Yeah, well, is that you think that's why Kamala dumped him? She's an ageist? Or was it a career move?
Okay, so he's not happy. Why isn't he happy, though?
Well, I think he's unhappy because he's been sidelined, actually. I feel badly for him. I feel badly for all has-beens. I feel badly for the president. I mean, to be a has-been while you're still in office, that is sad.
That is. Oh, sorry. Willie Brown's 87. Excuse me.
And you thought say he was 90.
Kamala Harris is 57. Okay.
Okay, so there was a slight difference in their ages. What, 30 years? Doesn't mean it can't work.
Anyhow.
You know, love wins.
Always.
Always. Love conquers all. See, it's people like you, people who are old souls, who look at something like 30 years ago, Willie and Kamala, and say, "Oh, look at the scandal." You don't understand. There was love there at the beginning of a beautiful career in politics, which has gone all the way up almost to the White House and maybe into it shortly.
Awesome. That's awesome stuff right there. But,
yeah.
Okay, so where are we on the calendar? What's coming up?
Funny you should ask. Well, in real time, we're in the third day of the octave of the Epiphany. But 2 days hence will be when our friends are really seeing us. This will be the fifth day of the octave of the Epiphany, which means we're in the midst of Epiphany Tide. But wait, there's more. We will be in the Christmas season in one sense until Candlemas, the 2nd of February, the feast of the purification of Our Lady, the presentation of our Lord, and in another sense, is sort of kind of Christmas really holds on till Lent begins. Mardi Gras is the last gasp of Christmas, the very last, even though it's the end of Septuagesima season. And that in turn will follow after the Sundays after Epiphany. Even so, it's still connected to Christmas. I mean, I can't help but think of the purple, green, and gold Mardi Gras colors in New Orleans and not get a slight thrill of Christmas. Yeah, it's we've got to keep Christmas going as long as possible. However, all of that being wonderful and true, nevertheless, there is something I have to take up with you.
What?
I received a letter.
Okay. What are you doing?
Are you ready?
You're going to read it? Okay.
I'm going to read it. Apparently, this was sent. It was sent to me from the Tumbler House mailroom and didn't go through your hands, which is highly unusual. Usually when I get letters from you guys, they're like holes cut out of them, the words cut out so I don't get excited or upset. But they sent me the whole thing uncensored.
Okay.
Dear Mr. Coulombe, This letter is in response to your ignorant attacks on New Jersey. Firstly, it is not New Jersey-ite, but New Jersey-an. Ite and an are underlined. You did not know that. How do you know I didn't know that? There are no Monophysites in New Jersey, much less plundering bands of them. You are not too smart. Signed, Bob Reingold, Fort Lee, New Jersey. Okay, firstly, Mr. Gateway to Weehawken, New Jersey, with a name, the New York dry beer, Rheingold beer. Seriously? What, do you like the Rheingold era, Mr. Rheingold? All right, never forget that. And I don't know if I'm not too smart. Some people are incapable of taking a joke. If it's a joke. Because
I don't think it's a joke, Charles, because we've gone from Andrew from New Jersey. He wrote
who knows New Jersey better than Andrew from New Jersey? He's actually from there. All we've got on the other side is this guy from Fort Lee with a New York last name.
Yeah, so Andrew from New Jersey.
He's not from the heart, the beating heart of the Garden State.
What's the beating heart of the Garden State?
The Paramus Mall.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay. But no, Andrew from New Jersey seems to be in trouble. He wrote to us and he says, "Great sirs, there is no time to waste at this. I call for aid to hasten to our rescue. We were recently attending Mass at the St. Anthony of Padua Oratory, the Institute of Christ the King's parish in West Orange, New Jersey, when, as we were exiting, we were besieged by a horde of Monophysite barbarians.
Get that, Bob?
After a small skirmish, we retreated to a place we thought they would dare not enter. Rutt's Hut in Clifton, New Jersey, home of the Ripper."
Yes! And let me tell you something. If you ever see a Ripper, ladies and gentlemen, those Rippers look as though they've been through it. They've been through the mill.
Yeah, Google them. They're completely mangled up, and never seen a hot dog look like that before. But
you've never seen them deep fried, but they're very tasty. Also, the prices at Rutt's Hut are really, really economical.
Yeah, unbeatable prices. All right.
If you find yourself in Clifton, New Jersey, or anywhere near the greater Clifton metropolitan area, hit Rutt's Hut. Is this product placement?
Yes.
Hit Rutt's Hut. You should have a Ripper for the sake of having one, but I would go into their steak frites or whatever it is. It is so inexpensive, but so good.
So Andrew from New Jersey goes on. He says, "It turns out their rejection of Chalcedon was not also a rejection of hot dogs, so they quickly found us. Again, we fled north, this time to Mawa, where we finally engaged the villainous heretics outside of the State Line Diner. They will write
renowned in song and story.
They will write songs about the Battle of Mawa, my friends. We fought bravely, but the sheer number of Monophysites could not be overcome. We sustained heavy casualties and are now taking refuge in the tombs of the Ramapo Mountains. I fear we will soon be defeated. They have taken the bridge and the second hall. We have barred the gates, but cannot hold them for long. The ground shakes. Drums in the deep. We cannot get out. The shadow moves in the dark. We cannot get out. They are coming. The Brogue of the Ramapo Mountains approacheth."
Signed, Balin, Lord of Ramapo. Well, that's a terrible story, Andrew. I hope you escape at some point. But if not, we'll send in Bob Reingold to fetch you. I'm sure he'll be able to deal with this stuff. New Jersey is such a emotionally filled topic. It people have very strong views on New Jersey, both for and against. Have you noticed that?
I have. It's interesting.
How do you feel?
I feel very strongly about it, both ways.
Well, listen, Jersey is like a barrel tapped at both ends, you know. New York here, Philly here. But having said that, I've got to be honest. I have a great affection for Jersey, as I do for Pennsylvania, New England, and my native state of New York. The Northeast, it seems to me, has a frisson all its own. This mixture of colonial and immigrant, with some of the most beautiful scenery in the country. It's and some of the most incredible architecture. Even though from Ohio to the Dakotas, I have traveled around the Midwest, from Maryland to Texas and Oklahoma through Dixie, and of course the far West. I've lived most of my life, and I love it all. But there is something very special about the Keystone State, the Empire State, the Garden State, and the 6 New England states. Just something very, I don't know, with the possible exception of Eastern Ohio, if you go to a diner anywhere else, it's imitation. You know, package stores. I mean, where do you have that kind of socialism outside of the Northeast? You know?
Yeah.
I think Virginia has package stores, but that's about it.
Yeah.
You know, I just, yeah, I really love the Northeast.
Yeah.
It's not SoCal. And think of how many crime families in the Northeast ended up going legit, going elsewhere.
Yeah, there's a lot.
No.
I wouldn't know anything about that, but I'm there's from what I hear, there's a lot.
There's success stories in my book. You know, and again, from Pittsburgh to Portland, where else in the country does the phrase "the old neighborhood" really have? In what other big cities outside the Northeast does that? You wouldn't find Officer Clancy. And well, maybe in Chicago.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. Yeah.
You might find him in Chicago. You might find a lot of other people in Chicago. But outside of Chicago, I mean, you figure Boston, New York, Philly, Pittsburgh. You've got a lot of urban centers in the Northeast. But really, Chicago sits alone in the Midwest.
It's true.
Just the way San Francisco sits alone in the West.
What? What did you say?
I'm sorry. I said the way San Francisco sits alone in the West.
It sits alone as what?
As a real city, you know.
Okay, just turn in your Angelino badge. You're
wait,
done.
Wait.
You're done.
Wait a minute.
Just get out. Just get out. Your LA privileges are cut.
You
stay over there in Austria. You ain't coming back.
Hold on. Has anyone ever seriously asserted that Los Angeles was a city in that sense? We all know it's 1,000 suburbs looking for a center. When was the last time you were in downtown LA?
That's not fair. There's been COVID and there's restrictions, so I don't go there.
Okay. No, fine. When was the last time prior to 2 years ago?
Oh gosh.
That I didn't take you, I mean.
I don't know. I maybe it was a while. It was a couple of years, I guess.
Of course it was. Because you do not look at LA's downtown the way city dwellers look at their downtowns. You just don't.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah. It's not a city in the way that San Francisco is a city, or Chicago, or New York, or Philly, or Boston, or Pittsburgh, or Cincinnati, or Louisville, or New Orleans.
It's a city like Rome, you know? It's more of a city. It's like it's an idea, you know?
A bad one. Gosh. Go back to the drawing board with that one, pal. If it's an idea, I want to know what it is they're trying to sell. It's an idea. It's a vision. It's a vision wrapped in brown smog and purple stockings.
prettiest sunrises in the nation. Or
Yeah, well, that's
not
true.
sunrises, sunsets.
Oh, I'm sure that's true. The chemical clouds really make it beautiful. I mean, it looks like something on Alpha Centauri. It's very lovely.
All right. I thought we were talking about New Jersey here. You're getting wrapped up. You switched coasts on us.
All right, I'll go back to the East Coast since
All right.
you're so pushy. No, I think though that Jersey gets a raw deal.
Things to do in New Jersey from Connor. Leave. Yeah.
All right. You know, I've got to fine. Hold on just a minute. Since he did, you know what? I'm sticking up for our Garden State friends. Let me see.
You have to dig deep on this one, that's for sure.
I am going to come up with something that's going to make you wish you'd been a good person for once. Are you ready?
Okay.
My favorite restaurant/bar in New Jersey is actually the south of the state. Sorry. Misplaced it. Hold on. You'll see. Here we go. Here we go. Are you ready?
Ready.
Are you ready to apologize?
Because you're able to show one decent diner in the state? No.
I'm not talking about a diner. I am talking about the fabulous Fox and Hound Tavern in Lebanon, New Jersey.
The Fox and Hound Tavern?
Yes. At the Lebanon Hotel in beautiful Lebanon, New Jersey.
Okay, it looks okay.
Okay. But that's not all. Listen to the menu. Now, I'm not going to bother with all the other stuff. Listen to these entrees, okay? Duck hash skillet. Where are you going to get that, smart guy? Salmon, short rib, porterhouse pork chop, steak frites, roasted chicken, steak mac and cheese. The Fox and Hound, the beautiful Lebanon, New Jersey. Or how about the Gladstone Tavern in Gladstone, New Jersey, huh?
All right, well, let's
the
save
Ho Ho Kuss. How many people go to Ho Ho Kuss and go to the Ho Ho Kuss Inn and Tavern? See?
All right.
See? I just got to say, there was actually, as I recall, and I do recall, there was what was the Cranberry Inn? I haven't been there in a few years.
Why'd you save it for? If people want to know about New Jersey, they can go to a New Jersey appreciation podcast instead.
Is there such a thing?
I doubtful.
Well,
I hope I don't eat my words on that one.
Well, I've got good news for you, or not good news. The Stockton Inn is still closed. Now, the reason why I'm unhappy about that, the Stockton Inn still being closed, is that it might be torn down. It's in Stockton, New Jersey, and the thing about the Stockton Inn, it was the inspiration for a song called "There's a Small Hotel," which I've always liked. I'm looking at pictures of the Stockton Inn now. Oh, please, somebody come along and rescue it and get it up and going again. We need more places like this in our godforsaken country, and not just in New Jersey. I mean, it's like the Travelers Rest in New York State was because of COVID. It's been closed for everything but events. You know, America, stop persecuting your cute old colonial inns, taverns, hotels, and restaurants. Build them up. If they've fallen on hard times, buy them, get them running again, and go visit them.
All right, here.
I mean, if you're living in San Marino, California, go to the Colonial Kitchen.
All right. We kind of did the part of the memes of production, but now we're really going to get into them. We have a bunch more memes, so
nationalize them
for the common good. As you guys know, we had taken off for Christmas because of our busy schedules. Connor, a patron, said, "That does it. I'm watching Oswald Dupree's channel instead. You made me do this."
Yeah, Oswald Dupree. Let me tell you about Oswald. He had a holiday special, all 70s music. Now, if you could get your gorge through that, ladies and gentlemen, you're a tougher man than I am. An all disco holiday songs. Really? Is that, you know what? If that's the kind of stuff you want to go for, Connor, burn your ears out. Up to you.
You're very mean-spirited when it comes to Oswald Dupree. Not very Christian.
What's to be Christian about? He's a loser and a fool, and he's dogged me my whole career. He's always trying to imitate my shtick, that he comes up with this half-baked garbage that, it makes me look bad.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
I'm not going to go see people say, "Why don't you get a mustache?" because of that stupid handlebar thing he's got going. Looks like he's wiping somebody's car with it. Moron.
All right. A couple other things. I guess we talked a little bit about the alternative milk. So John, who's also a patron, says, "There's a lot of talk about alternative milks these days. Soy, almond, oat, and whatever. Recently, I've taken a liking to cricket milk." Trademark. The nutritional composition is far superior, and while the taste does take some getting used to, I feel like we all must do our part. After all,
how do you hold the cricket still long enough to milk it?
Taste is conditioned, and no one is born with a preference for real milk. And then later he says, "Will Vincent Franchini?" He's saying that facetiously, of course. And then he says, "Will Vincent Franchini of TumblrHouse.com publicly denounce the oat slop as milk fallacy? Oats don't got udders."
Well, will you?
I've never had oat milk, but it might be decent. I tell you what, I'd have almond milk, and I've gotten into it with my cereal.
It's not milk. Almonds don't have udders either.
What is milk? It makes you think. I mean, is milk just an idea?
No. Milk is a delicious, highly nutritious liquid produced by placental mammal mothers for their offspring.
Well, if you had this liquid extracted from almonds that tastes just like milk, what would you call it?
I'd call it a milk substitute. I'd call it near milk. I'd call it phony milk.
That's why you're not in the marketing
I'd call
department.
It milk lie.
Milk lie. Almond milk lie.
Almond milk con.
But it's interesting. I'm actually surprised that the FDA kind of does allow this milk thing, because it's been cracking down on it, like a lot of other things. Like McDonald's in the 90s used to have these great chicken nuggets. They're very juicy, but then they mysteriously went away. And I mean, they always had chicken nuggets, but the chicken nuggets got dry. They tasted different, and I always wondered why. And apparently the FDA cracked down on McDonald's because they weren't using a lot of chicken on their nuggets. So the FDA was saying, like, you can't keep calling this chicken. So McDonald's ended up changing and use all, chicken. So too with, I was in the water industry, and it's the FDA really cracks down on what you call your water. Like you can't call it spring water unless it actually comes from a spring. Like that's a big deal. Like you actually have to call it like purified, distilled. There are a couple other things, but like it's very heavily regulated in that sense. So it's kind of surprising that they're loosey-goosey on the milk thing,
Well, I think it could be because Big Almond is paying them off.
Big Almond?
Yeah. Big Almond.
I like that.
Those guys, the Big Almond are completely unscrupulous. I mean, they're totally unscrupulous. Look at how they sell almond cream as a cosmetic.
Yeah, well, it's got antioxidants and some properties to it.
Yeah, but you wouldn't put it on your scones for tea, would you? Yeah, I didn't think so.
All right.
If it's not edible, why are they calling it almond anyway? Why don't they just call it white goo?
It doesn't quite have the same ring to it in appeal, but
white goo. How about white slop?
Better than almond lye.
Almond lye would be truth in advertising. See, are you sure Big Almond hasn't gotten to you?
I don't know. Maybe their propaganda has leached into my mind. All right.
Big Almond, they're always lurking. They've got agents everywhere.
What is not to change the topic, but what is from Big Almond?
Yeah, but pulling it away from Big Almond. Listen, we're gonna expose Big Almond. We're gonna break this. You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Big Almond has got to become responsible for everything they've done.
Have you noticed that nobody's been asking these questions other than us?
No, nobody. This is investigative reporting, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to crack the Big Almond case ride wide open. No one's asking these questions. And no one wants to hear the answers either. But we don't care. We're not going to be stopped in our search for the truth.
That's right.
We'll show them, ladies and gentlemen. And Big Almond, let me tell you something. Big Almond, cracking Big Almond's facade of rectitude is going to end the common cold in America. Because they're behind that too. It's not, you know what? It's not really a cold. It's an almond allergy. And the fact that almonds go into everything we eat now and everything we drink is responsible for the common cold. When you pick up a can of beef stew or a bag of dog food, do you ever see almonds listed? No. See? Where's your FDA now? Yeah, they don't talk about it, do they? No. Oh, and you know what? They get away with almond milk. They don't say anything about almond water, do they?
No.
No.
It's sort of like high fructose corn syrup, right? It's in everything. There you go.
Only we know about that. We don't know about the almonds.
That's right.
How about the pasta you had? How do you know there isn't a bit of almonds put into the pasta flour? You don't know.
I don't know.
Why aren't all of the labels required to reveal what percentage is almond?
We'll get to the bottom of this.
I think so. Instant mashed potatoes. There's another one. I bet they're filled with almonds.
Yep, we'll see.
Flour, baking soda.
Big time.
Cornmeal. See, all this stuff, ladies and gentlemen, is being concealed from you by a coalition of your government, media, academia, and Big Almond.
All right. Enough of asking questions that no one else is asking. Let's ask the questions that people are actually asking.
Oh, well, that's a change of pace. You mean zero in on something people are actually interested in? Okay. I don't see why we're changing horses in midstream, but fine.
Okay.
Radical policy change, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be relevant.
All right. Let us. All right. A question from William, who says, could Charles share his thoughts about Desiderius Erasmus, the famous humanist scholar of the Renaissance? Why was he critical of the church and monasticism? What was his real beliefs concerning the church? And what was his reaction to the execution of his dear friend, St. Thomas More?
Well, those are really good questions. Erasmus really was not someone who understood the need for the contemplative life. That's for sure. And he certainly criticized monastic abuses. He also criticized what he considered to be superstition in devotional practices. But, and there's a big but here, that was all before the Reformation. But when push came to shove, like St. Thomas More, even though it would have been very much to his advantage to have jumped ship, he refused, and he stayed Catholic. It is interesting to note that that was true. You know, they like to say that the humanist movement was the prequel to the Reformation and blah, blah, blah. The problem with that idea is that the vast majority of the leading humanists who were actually alive at the time, the Carmelite monk Poulsen, or Carmelite friar Poulsen in Denmark, St. Thomas More, St. John Fisher, Erasmus, Reuchlin, whose nephew was Melanchthon, the big Lutheran leader. All of these guys who would have benefited immensely by joining the Reformation refused to. Even in the case of St. John Fisher and St. Thomas More, at the loss of life. Or in the case of Erasmus and Reuchlin, the loss of employment prospects. So, what was his real belief? I believe he was a Catholic. His criticisms of this or that may not have been correct, or he might have criticized an institution when it was particular abuses that were the problem. But at the end of the day, he could say the four creeds, and that's what makes a Catholic. So it may be that some of his work had a, they say, well, it laid the groundwork for the Reformation. That might be true to a degree, but you never really know, especially when things look one way, how it's going to work out. Remember that before the Reformation, the status quo seemed completely solid and entrenched. But in just a few years, everything changed. So your views in 1512 might have been quite different in 1532. Because, for one thing, if nothing else, you see, if all you're seeing at one moment are the horrors of, say, papal abuses, and then over the next couple of decades, you see what happens to people who get rid of the papacy. And this, I mean, mutatis mutandis, let's pretend that we were trapped in, the present. And your entire concept of the papacy was bound up with the abuses of the current pontificate. Well, you might be very strident against them, and in doing so, possibly even damage to a degree the office itself. But then you get a new pontificate, and then you get a huge revolt. What do you do? And that, I mean, honestly, I can take any amount of truthful criticism of a pope, but not a jot or a tittle of denial of the office, even if the denial comes from the man himself. Despite the past two pontificates, the Pope is still the Vicar of Christ and the Patriarch of the West. Still has the right to wear the tiara, even if he doesn't. And that, you know, whether he's good or bad, that is to say, any given Pope, that really is up for grabs. You can have evil popes. How do we know that? Because we've had them. You can have saintly popes. How do we know that? Because we've had them. You can have really mediocre popes. How do we know that? Because we've had them. I do think it's important to remember that these gentlemen don't jump out of a duffel bag. They're a product of their times, just like the subjects are. So, at any rate, to answer the question about Erasmus, he was a Catholic, and he died a Catholic, and that's what matters. I hope he saved his soul.
Right. Question from Vendée Radio, who says, Dear Charles, out of the 15 major heresies that have confronted the Catholic Church, Protestantism was the first which the Church did not overcome. Why?
Politics. It was the first that very, very professedly went after getting secular support and then offered church lands as compensation if you went Protestant. I mean, you've got to remember that in the countries that went Protestant, you had the church was sitting on top of properties that were the result of generations and generations of donations to the church. There were a huge chunk of land that was basically tax-free, where the rents did not go up. Because you see, when a lord would die at that period of history, the rent would be renegotiated. But you see, the church didn't die. So if you were a tenant working on land belonging to the Abbey of Grosmagnier, your rents didn't increase because there was never a death. So the feudal duties never went up. All that came to I mean, it was a tremendous prize because the church lands are usually very well developed. Monks were at the forefront of agricultural development. So the things they did in terms of making their lands profitable were really incredible. And suddenly, all of that is promised to the king or the local lord to disperse as he likes. And when he does, you've suddenly created a whole class of people in whose interest it is to maintain the new religion. Because if the old religion comes back, they might lose their property. That was a real worry. So, I mean, Queen Mary had to guarantee that she would not try to take back all of the property that had been given away by the king, by her father. And then Charles I, it's an interesting thing. When he was in prison, he made a vow to God that he would return the monastic lands that were in the hands of the crown. Well, there wasn't that much. There's Westminster Abbey, a few other places that the crown still owned that had been church lands. He would return all that. But obviously, he was not in a position to return the other church lands. So that was why. influencing, immediately glomming on to the power structure, and then creating in every country where this took place a wealthy and powerful class that was dedicated by its very existence to keeping the church from coming back.
Okay. Andrew from New Jersey says, "What's up, bros? Greetings and salutations from the land of Taylor Ham, Bruce Springsteen, and Jug Handle Turns.
Oh,
Remember going to the new Mass back in the 90s, and at one point the cantor would sing very dramatically with hands raised, 'Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again.'" I remember that very well.
Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again.
I remember that.
Are you
and
crying?
so
Are you weeping?
Andrew
nostalgia?
asks, what was up with that? Like, where did that come from? It wasn't in the rubrics as far as I know, yet it seemed to be in every Mass. Also, can Charles remark upon any liturgical anomalies from Novus Ordo that went away with Pope Benedict's reforms in the early 2000s? If he can, please do so. If he cannot do this request, I request that he give us a stirring rendition of the Minstrel Boy in his thickest Irish brogue.
You know, just because it's the Christmas season, I'll do both. So you had several of these things. I don't know where they came from, but liturgy committees would go in for these weird what do you call it, fads that they would pick up at conferences and so on. So there was doing the Great Amen as stealing it from Lilies of the Field. Amen. 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 That was one.
I like the Gloria one. Gloria, Gloria,
Gloria.
In excelsis Deo.
Yeah. And the Echo Our Father. Our Father, who art in heaven,
Wow.
hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, on earth, as it is in heaven. In other words, they all jump on that one line.
Oh.
And that was pretty annoying. Let me see. Now, of course, I haven't heard this since the 60s, but for a short period, the most popular communion processional hymn was "Today, while the blossoms still cling to the vine, I'll taste your strawberries, I'll drink your sweet wine. A million tomorrows may all pass away, ere I forget all the joy that is mine today."
Wow. The 60s were pretty wild.
They were pretty wild. That was my first communion in '68. I remember that. That was hot stuff. And they had, a lot of. Another one was everybody reciting "In Him, with Him."
How yeah.
Gosh, everybody would recite with the priest. Let me
I don't
see.
I don't think I
Yeah, I do. Let me see. Hold on
through
a
him,
second.
with him, in him, through the unity of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, that's the one. Everybody would recite that with the priest, which was a definite no-no. So that was one.
Okay.
Let me see. And of course, holding hands to the Our Father.
Yeah.
That was, or else either holding hands or holding melons.
So that's through liturgical committees.
Liturgical committees, yeah.
But, I mean, is stuff like that still happening?
I'm sure.
Okay.
I'm sure. So now, having done half of the request, here's the other half. The minstrel boy to the war has gone. In the ranks of death you'll find him. His father sad he has carried on, and his wild harp slung behind him. Land of song, cried the minstrel bold, all the world betray thee. One heart at least thy right shall, one sword at least thy right shall guard. One faithful harp shall praise thee. The minstrel fell, but the foreman's steel could not bring that proud spirit under. The harp he loved never spoke again, for he tore its cars asunder. Ne'er shall chain or soul leave thee, thy soul of love and bravery. Thy songs were meant for the pure and free, and shall never sound in slavery. Officer Clancy himself couldn't have done better.
Very nice, Charles. Thank you.
You feeling Irish now?
No.
You got your Irish up? Erin go bra?
What does that mean?
Ireland forever.
Ah.
Do you feel like we're in a sort of an ancient order of Hibernians meeting? Friendly sons of St. Patrick?
Slightly.
Feeling kind of Mickish, you know, shamrocks and kind of getting ready for St. Patrick's Day a little early.
Speaking of that, I've been meaning to ask, what are you wearing today? What's that? I don't believe I've seen that little button before from you.
This is the Society of Christ the King, who are watchers of ours. A spin-off from what was left of the late lamented counter-revolution.
Oh, okay.
And I was presented with this, I will have you know, in beautiful New Jersey.
Are you serious?
Yep.
There's no escape.
You can't. Why would you want to escape New Jersey? Listen to you. Would you like a ripper?
Eventually, if I'm ever in New Jersey.
Or would you prefer Callahan's hot dogs? Not made from horse meat.
I'd probably try both. See what all the hype is about.
Would you go to the Paramus Mall?
I would definitely go to the Paramus Mall. It better be the most amazing place in the world.
Oh, it is. It is extraordinary. Imagine, if you will, Rome, Jerusalem, Compostela, Aachen, and Glastonbury all wrapped into one beautiful package.
Seems a bit much.
It really is. I think I've really got over the top with that. I think let's just say it's a decent mall.
Oh, okay. There we go. All right. Question from Mason, who says, in this past week's episode, when talking about Santa Claus, Charles mentioned how Episcopalianism often blurs the Americanist and the religious. This got me to thinking about how the Church of England and the Episcopalians are quite woke. According to Rod Dreher, this week they are now openly encouraging non-binary clergy, which seems like something so crazy that not even James Martin would be okay with. This allowed me to.
I've often thought Cardinal Cepich was a prototype of non-binary.
This allowed me to wonder if, just as cultural Calvinism has always been the dominant force in American life, including with wokery, what if the various Anglican churches are just a religious reflection of the dominant culture? To put it in other words, the various Anglican churches seem to have always agreed with whatever the culture in their country says, and to basically give a religious okay, to whatever ridiculous governmental project is going on. In this sense, the Anglican and Episcopalian wokery is not in defiance of Anglicanism, but a natural continuation of it. For example, just as Henry VIII got the Church of England to believe and do whatever he wanted, as he was culturally dominant, the dominant cultural forces of our modern age, the various woke colleges and politicians, get the various Anglican communion churches to do whatever they want. Is this a fair assessment? And how are some ways that cultural and governmental factors have altered Anglicanism in all of its forms?
Well, yeah, you're absolutely correct. I mean, one of the the thing about Anglicanism is that there are two aspects to it. One good and one not so. I've got a very good friend of mine who was one of my roommates in college. So this is 1,000 years ago. Very was a pal of mine to this day. Really great guy. Raised Episcopalian, Southern fellow. And we were having a conversation back when I was in college. And he said, so we're talking about 1979, 1980. And he said, you know, Charles, the Episcopal Church has got 180 degrees from what it was when I was young. Back then, it was the Church of Beauty, and now it's a screaming freak show. You know, I don't understand it. And I said, well, you're right in one way and not in another. You're right in the sense that the accidents have changed. But you've got to remember that the Church of England was originally invented by Henry VIII to bless and sanctify whatever the top people wanted. It was their church. So as they changed, it would change. When you and I were kids, it was the tail end of the dominant classes in our country having some grasp on etiquette, which fork to use. They didn't drool, you know, they didn't sit on their faces, they weren't scum. But now that the rulership are all those things, their church had to alter to become like them. But that's only one aspect of it, I said to him. The other aspect is that there were people who really did believe connected to it. And every time there'd be one of these changes, they were stuck in the lurch. But you're obviously one of these. But you know what they called people like you the very first time this happened? He said, no, what? I said, Catholics. But it is true, though. It's important to bear in mind that alongside this Me Tooism, this sanctification of whatever the rulership want, which at different times has led to the Church of England being called the House of Lords in prayer, the Anglican Church of the West Indies being called the Planter class in prayer, and our own Episcopal Church being called the Republican Party in prayer. In addition to that, it's important to bear in mind that there were, and still, oddly enough, to some degree, are real religious elements of it, what Benedict XVI called the Anglican patrimony. And it was that religious element that gave life to it. Otherwise, it would just have been, you know, nothing. It would have been a purely state institution. But the religious aspect of it is what produced people like C.S. Lewis and Charles Williams and T.S. Eliot and so on. They didn't pop out of nowhere, and they had something to work with. Today, I think it's very unlikely that they would be able to stay Anglican. And that's why I think it was at a most judicious time, both in terms of them and in terms of us, that Benedict XVI created the Anglican Ordinariates. Because, for several different reasons, one, because to some degree they retained bits and pieces of medieval heritage or rediscovered them or recreated them that we've lost. Two, because they had maintained a sense of reverence and so on, which we certainly got rid of after Vatican II. Thirdly, because they had an intellectual and cultural heritage, which we did not have in English-speaking countries, we being Catholics, because we were a persecuted minority. they pursued all sorts of things which the church in other countries, France, Spain, Italy, etc., had. English-speaking Catholicism did not. But Anglicanism, as I say, either held on to pieces and bits of it or else recreated it, rediscovered it. All of that, the rightful place for it is in the Catholic Church. So what you've seen in Anglicanism's auto-demolition over the past several decades is those two elements slowly separating completely. With what was valuable going in our direction, one way or the other, faster or slower, and what was not, continuing to do what it's always done. Now, as for examples of this, well, sure. The language of the Book of Common Prayer found its way into the official armed forces prayer books, the Methodist prayer books, the these and thous that we associate with prayer in English. That all comes to us from the Anglicans. The National Cathedral in Washington, where so many of our presidential funerals and so forth have taken place. Churches associated with American history, like the Old North Church in Boston, whose great claim to fame is being Paul Revere's church, where the one up by land, two up by sea. And every year they have a commemorative service where they shine a lantern in the tower, the way it was done that night. The beautiful, beautiful George Washington Memorial Chapel at Valley Forge, which is gorgeous. And every year every day they have a flag ceremony for each of the 50 states. The patina of neo-Gothicism that you'll see, again, in a lot of our military chapels, comes to us from the Episcopal Church. Between World War II, the Civil War and World War II, in a lot of ways, Episcopalianism functioned as a sort of quasi-state church. Hence, everything I've described, but also its place in some of our major universities. Columbia, Princeton was Presbyterian, of course, but a lot of our southern universities were Episcopalian. And of course, they had a big presence at Harvard, even though it was a Unitarian school. So it had ceremonies like the Kirkin of the Tartans, and all sorts of veterans and military ceremonies that are conducted by Episcopal priests. The blessing of the hounds in hunt country. Inevitably, well-to-do people with their hounds and horses, blessed on St. Hubert's Day by the local Episcopal parson. And they were very big in chaplaincies for police and fire. Community stuff. You'd often see them also as chaplains for the legislative bodies, the Congress, the state legislatures, and various city councils around the country.
What are some of the biggest examples of Americanism and Freemasonry in Episcopalianism?
Well, just what I've said, and the number of ranking Episcopal clergy at different times who have been Freemasons. Also, in Masonry itself, remember what I said about the sort of neo-Gothicism in the Episcopal Church? Well, that made its way into parts of Freemasonry, what they call the Knights Templar, and things like that, who claim to descend from the medieval Knights Templar. They have, if you get the chance, you go to the George Washington National Memorial Museum in Alexandria, Virginia. It's this gigantic building. It's huge. But at every floor has a different Masonic theme, and one of them is a medieval chapel for the Knights Templar. You could offer a mass in it. I wouldn't, but you could. It's shaped perfectly for it. And similarly, they commemorate St. John's Day, which we just had, the 27th. They have a sort of Last Supper service on Maundy Thursday. That all comes to Episcopalianism. And of course, the leading founding fathers who were Episcopalian were also all Freemasons.
Yeah.
Washington, Monroe, Madison. Jefferson, there's a lot of question about. And of course, he didn't stay Anglican; he became Unitarian.
Okay. Lastly, if Catholics are to manage to convert America, will it be okay for us to adopt many previously Americanist things but convert them to Catholic use, similar to how early Catholic missionaries adopted local customs, or are America's foundations too Protestant to do so? Given that even Christmas is a Catholicized version of a pre-Christian tradition, I think that we can Catholicize American traditions such as Labor Day by honoring St. Joseph, for instance.
Oh, I think we could. I took a stab at it in Star Spangled Crown, but I think it can be done. And it's something that you wouldn't have to put too much thought to, because if the people were ever converted, these things would happen organically, the way Christmas did. It's not as though people sat around saying, "I know, we'll invent Christmas trees and holly and mistletoe." It was organic.
Yeah. One final question: is Mr. Coulombe familiar with Wreaths across America? What are his thoughts on it, and do any European countries have similar traditions?
Well, Wreaths Across America is a custom whereby in December 17th or 18th, I think, wreaths honoring veterans who have died in this country's wars are laid in about 2,000 different cemeteries, some VAs, some not, around the country. And the answer is, oh yeah, sure. Every country has similar ways of honoring their veterans, usually with wreaths. It's interesting, speaking of wreaths, the President of the United States, whomever he may be, every year on the death day of a given president, sends a wreath to the grave of that president.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there'll be a wreath on President Reagan's grave. There'll be a wreath on the day from the president in Washington. Nixon's grave, Ford's grave, Carter's alive.
So, I mean, are there 40-something wreaths?
Yeah.
Like yearly, on a yearly basis?
Yes.
Oh, I see. Interesting.
Every year. Well, in a certain sense, the president operates as the high priest of the national cult.
Yeah.
And that's one of the presidential wreaths is a big part of that.
All right. So we got some Christmas questions here. They came in like a couple days before Christmas. We didn't have a Christmas episode, but it's still the Christmas season, so we're gonna go ahead and ask them.
Okay.
Question from James, who says, "Where did the tradition of telling ghost stories at Christmas time come from? What are some of your favorite Christmas ghost stories?"
Oof. Well, it's a pretty old custom. I mean, it's something that the English have been doing for a long time, and the French used to do. I suppose because it's the dead of winter, and also because it's a season given up to the miraculous. There are all sorts of strange stories about Christmas Eve, how animals can speak, and they all kneel at midnight. Water left out will turn to wine, they tell you in some places. In other places, not at Christmas, but around then, if you hide on the church porch, you'll see the image of everyone who's going to die in the coming year and march into the graveyard. I mean, they've got all sorts of interesting ideas and traditions in different parts of the Christian world. So it certainly is a time, they always say that Halloween is a time when the veil between this world and the next is very thin. Well, I think that actually continues into the new year. It certainly feels that way anyway. At Christmas, the ghost of Christmas past is very much with each of us. I don't know about the other two, but Christmas past we definitely feel. Now, as to my favorite Christmas ghost stories, well, anything by M.R. James. because all of his stories were written as Christmas ghost stories. And of course, A Christmas Carol, Cricket on the Hearth, Dickens's Christmas ghost stories I like very much. I like The Children of Greenknow, which, even though it's a novel, is definitely qualifies as a Christmas ghost story. Yeah, that kind of, I would say, just offhand.
Okay. Final question for this episode is from Cal, who says, "Merry Christmas, Vincent and Charles. It's notable to me that all the Christian holidays, Christmas is by far the most popular, even in the secular world. Why is it that Christmas was the Catholic holiday that became the most favored over time for religious and secular people alike? Furthermore, why is it that other major Christian holidays like Easter did not achieve the same degree of popularity?"
Part of it, I think, is because of the time of year. It comes during the winter when it's cold and people want warmth and they want joy. And of course, it's near the turning of the year when people really do reflect, perhaps more seriously than any other time of year, on who they are and where they've been and where they're going. I think that's part of it. I think, of course, obviously our shopkeeper friends love the whole gift giving thing, and we like to get gifts, so that's nice. But I think more than that, also, it's the light shining in darkness. Certainly, too, Christmas has a much more striking color scheme than Easter. Easter's all pastels and, whites and so forth. But Christmas is red and gold and green and just very, very flashy. Also, I think, too, in a sense, it's less challenging because Christ appears to us as an infant. To get to Easter, you've got to go through the Passion, which is hard. And Easter itself is a very joyful holiday, but it's flowers and ham and candies and all that. It's at once more challenging and yet not as striking as Christmas.
I'm a little bit more cynical because I always felt that it's the money behind it, right? Like all the commerce and all the energy, so that creates this sort of energy that on the television, in the media, that everyone's hyping it up. It's they're fueling it. I don't know if it's true. It seems like you have a different opinion, but so let me ask you this.
Well, and also I'll say Easter never had apologists like Charles Dickens and Washington Irving.
That's interesting. So what? Okay, so when did Washington Irving live?
1784, I guess, to 1859.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Was Christmas a bigger deal in the mid-19th century in England and the United States than now? Or is it a bigger deal now?
In the early 19th century, it wasn't that big of a deal. But in the mid-19th century, it certainly was. It got really big. And also it helped the Queen Victoria and Prince Albert threw themselves into it.
Okay.
Now, interestingly enough, the Queen generally spends Easter at Windsor, and they call that Easter Court. But it doesn't have the same, actually gives a Christmas speech, but not an Easter speech. And when she goes to, she usually spends Christmas at Sandringham in East Anglia. And you always see her and the royal family going to church in Sandringham Parish Church for Christmas. You never see them going to church in Windsor for Easter. Oh, they do, but they don't make a big deal of it.
All right. Well, that's the end of the show. Time to wrap it up, Charles.
Wrap it up. But what if I'm feeling reluctant to leave? What if I'm feeling like people don't really understand, for instance, how deeply devoted to the Garden State natives of New Jersey are.
Okay. Well, it's okay, Charles. You don't need to solve the world's problems.
What if some people don't realize that natives of New Mexico are really in love with their state's roots going back to medieval Spain?
Well, isn't that that's in their charge, right? Like, that's not your job. You're in Austria right now, right? Do you
Yeah,
want
but
to speak for them?
what about people living in Washington State and Oregon? You know, enjoying the Northwest and the temperate rainforest and the pine trees and all that stuff and the coffee. What about them?
What about them? What? Okay, good for them. Awesome.
I just think that we need to explore a little more their consciousness, their sensitivity, what they've been through.
Okay, how are we going to do that?
Well, I think we have to ask ourselves a lot of questions. I mean, what have we done for them? I mean, here you're dealing with people in the big cities who've been handed over basically like meat pies on a tray to criminals by their mayors. Now, you know, how do we react to that? What do we say? What's our response?
This is ridiculous.
What?
We
What's
say
ridiculous?
nothing in.
You think it's a good thing that they're being handed over like meat pies to criminals?
No, it's a bad thing, but what are you going to do?
That's my question. What is our response? How do we respond as people from out of town?
We change the channel.
I guess I'll take care of that.
I want
problem.
something nice. I'll turn Hallmark on. I want some fun stuff, some nice stuff. I don't want this stuff. These.
well, okay, everybody in Seattle and Portland, you heard it from the boss. If you're really upset with being given over to the madmen by your mayors, click. What about the people in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis?
What about them? Are they
Same?
suffering too?
Yeah, of course. They got the lame brains who do you want to defund the police? Well, what's your answer?
My answer is vote them out. I thought we live in a democracy here, right? That's what they say, right?
Put your mask on and socially distance. Who do you think you're trying to kid?
Why don't you tell these people that? Why are you telling me
I'm
that?
not here to tell them what to do.
Oh, you're only here to tell me what to do.
No, you are an authority figure. You are the president of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. People look up to you. They see you as the incarnation of the entrepreneurial spirit that made this country great, that brought our forefathers across the seas from Europe, and then over the continent through the covered wagons, and finally to the West Coast, where they made their fortunes. They look at you and they see in you everybody from Davy Crockett to Daniel Boone to Andrew Carnegie. And it's in that spirit that America is looking to you for guidance. You have to accept the fact that for the average person, you are a combination of George Washington and George Custer.
Well, I tell them toughen up, keep your chin up, stiff upper lip.
Did you say stiff upper lip or zip up your lip?
I said stiff upper lip, but zip up your lip is good too.
Well, thanks a lot for that guidance. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it from the very top of the Tumbler House Tower. Well, all right, you didn't. You heard it from the old studio, but still. Well, all I can say is that I at the end of the show, all I can say is that New Year is upon us. Still filled with hope, still filled with possibilities, definitely filled with challenges. I'm not going to make any predictions for this year, despite the beliefs of some. I can't really see the future, but I do believe that Omicron is going to devastate COVID. It will become, over the next month, the And then it'll be superseded by even less lethal, but easier to catch stuff. How our masters respond to its departure, that is going to be one important issue. And then how their subjects respond once it's gone. How will our masters get out of the supreme control that they've assumed with a straight face? And will there be blowback from their minions? I don't know. We'll see. But that will be the great drama of 2022, I suspect, will be...
You know, it's weird because so you don't think like, I don't know, that there's any, like, we're coming out of the darkest days of COVID. Don't you think there's any venting or steam being let off? You seem like to suggest that it's all pent up.
No, I think that there's a lot that has happened as a result of this, whose results we won't know until we get them. In other words, think back a year ago when you'd been denied the sacraments for months and you were ready to break something over somebody's head.
Yeah.
Well, you no longer feel like that, but those resentments are still there. And if something else serves to bring them out.
Well, coincidentally, I actually abandoned every single parish that I was going to that decided to mess around, and I went to the one. Now I go to the one that didn't mess around. So that's what happened.
And that's what happened, and that is a very specific result of that. Well, multiply that by everybody's experiences with everything from restaurants to churches, and I guarantee you that restaurants that are risking their licenses by allowing non-vax patrons to slip in, if they don't get busted, I guarantee you they'll be doing bumper custom when this thing passes, because people aren't going to forget. Joe's Diner didn't hassle me when they could have.
Right. That's true.
Joe always had a place for me when I wanted that burger late at night, despite.
That's true.
And of course, you're also going to remember places that wouldn't let you in. And I mean, if you're more reasonable, you realize, well, they might have lost the licenses, but a lot of people aren't going to be reasonable. And also, the number of people who became passionate over vaccinating and not vaccinating and took it out on each other, that's not going to go away. So if you and your next door neighbor, who formerly were great friends, got into it one day over vaccine, and one of you said something that's not easily retaken, that's not going away. If you've got people in various government situations and employment situations who had to apply for exceptions on the basis of conscience or whatever. Well, now, before, people might not have known what their religion was or cared, but now it's an issue. That's not going to go away. So our social cohesion has been somewhat frayed. I hope not to the breaking point, of course, but and obviously the sooner this ends, the better it'll be. Now, our masters have shown themselves to be incredibly stupid, and that knowledge is not going to vanish either.
Yeah. All right. It's been an hour and a half. I think this was a really good episode. We had a lot of laughs and a lot of interesting topics today.
But, and a lot of tears. We laughed, we cried, we made mistakes.
Yeah.
It was terrible. It'll never be that way again. No. But isn't it wonderful? Happy days. Well, I'm trying to cram all the emotions of the past hour and a half into like 5 seconds. It's not working, actually. It's very difficult to do that. And you got to find out about Thelma, the Lady of the Evening.
That's right. That was very exciting.
You were too young to tell those stories too before, but I think you're old enough now.
Yeah, finally.
Uncle Giovanni, when I told him about her, I expected some sort of outrage or something. You know what he says to me?
What?
Who's running her?
Wow.
And I said, I think she's independent. He goes, well, okay. I find out one of them pimps is moving into this part of the world, kid. You tell me. I will. He didn't care about independent operators, but he hated pimps.
Yeah. All right. So remember, if it's Monday,
it's off the menu.
But what about the soul you save?
Well, studies show that in all likelihood, it'll be you.
See you next time.
God bless all.